Hello, and welcome to the Pubway podcast. My name is Tina Iannacchino. Today, we have a super special episode to help celebrate Women's Month. She Speaks AdTech, which is centered on simple yet powerful belief. Progress advances when experiences are shared. In leadership, we're often asked, what advice would you give your younger self? But real growth doesn't come from advice alone. It comes from lived moments, from lessons learned the hard way, and the behaviors we choose to practice differently today. And that's what today's conversation is about. I'm super thrilled to introduce a wonderful panel of women and some amazing voices from across the ecosystem in our industry. I'll kick it over to them for a brief introduction before we dive deeper. Priti, can we start with you?
Thanks, Tina. My name is Priti, and I'm Revenue and Growth Executive, also the co-founder of Advanced Women. I have about 20 years of experience, 10 in AdTech, mainly on the supply side at companies like Pomatic, OpenWeb, Trade Desk, and Assertive Yield. And then prior to that, I came into the industry with about 10 years of experience in Big Four in defense, nonlinear, been in customer success, sales, marketing, and operations. So yeah, great to be here. Thank you, Tina.
Perfect. KiYonna, I'd love to hear from you next.
Yes, hi, KiYonna Carr. I am the Director of Yield Strategy and Business Intelligence at Yahoo. I've been in the industry for also almost 20 years, which is hard to say sometimes or crazy to say. And I really have been almost primarily with Yahoo, which is, I think, a bit unique. But my career has really evolved within the company, and I've loved it. Started as a campaign analyst working on individual campaigns and eventually evolved to running entire marketplaces. So
amazing. Yeah, that's so super impressive. We feel like 4 years is long in our industry. 20 is very, very cool at one company. And then Shari, friendly face for me, but not for everyone else.
Yes. Thank you for having me. This is an amazing panel. And I'm Shari Munoz. I have spent most of my career in the agency life, been in the industry for about 20 years already. Been at places like Publicis, leading J3, at WPP Media 3 times. And most recently, I'm at Seedtag. So I lead research and measurement for North America. But I also had a part of AdTech back in 2019. So really, the space is amazing. So having lots of fun during my career.
We have too much fun here at Seedtag, that's for sure. And last but certainly not least, Mariam.
Thanks for the invitation. My name is Mariam Topeshashvili. So last name is slightly unpronounceable. I co-founded a startup here in Brazil called Avocado, which was a quick delivery startup. This was pre-COVID, and then I sold that to Rappi and led the quick delivery service vertical for Rappi in Latin America, more specifically focused in Brazil. And then most recently, in the last 3 years, I've been leading LTK's efforts in Latin America, and just now decided to start something anew. So right now, I'm in a transition mode.
And our industry is full of acronyms, but LTK should be known by most women listening to this podcast, I would hope. Amazing. Well, I would love to dive into a lot of fun topics today, and really starting with early career moments. So kind of where it started for you and what was missing. I'd love to actually pass it right over to Mariam, because I think you had a very fun story in our prep call, specifically not even AdTech related.
Right. Okay, where do I start? So, again, with my unpronounceable last name, I was actually born in Georgia, the country, not the state. Moved to Brazil when I was 4 years old as a refugee, and grew up in a favela, which is a local slum here in Brazil. But as luck would have it, I met incredible people throughout my journey that really empowered me and believed in me and empowered me to try and apply to everything that was available for me and to, try to look at everything. So I ended up with a full ride scholarship to Harvard at the age of 17. Went to Harvard, graduated in political science with honors, and right off the bat decided that I wanted to do something big and came back to Brazil to start a company. In between those experiences, what really made me believe that I could start something was a summer internship actually that I had at Kraft Heinz at the time. So I remember the project was something that I could not believe when I first heard. So basically my project was I had to basically sell more than 2 tons of frozen potatoes to someone because the ceiling of the factory in which those potatoes were actually packaged had fallen off. So imagine me, like second year, I guess a sophomore in college with a project that big. I was like, oh my gosh, like there's no way. Like I only know how to sell to like people. Who am I going to sell 2 tons of potatoes to? And that really opened up my eyes to the idea that I could do whatever I wanted and with whomever I wanted at whichever level, because I really started learning, I guess, about retail. And I had a previous experience, which was my dad. When we came to Brazil, my dad actually started selling sodas at the beach. So I obviously like knew a lot about, I guess, consumer perspectives and about consumer dynamics, but never about like B2B sales. Again, I learned the hard way, but also that really made me realize that there were a lot of opportunities in the Brazil market that didn't exist in the US market because the US market was slightly saturated at the time. More specifically, I realized the power of private label. So obviously I sold those 2 tons of potatoes to a US retailer, a very large US retailer, and they repackaged it under their private label brand. And at that time, private labels were like 60% of a consumer basket, which was very, very big for the US market. But again, in Brazil, that level was at 4-5% per consumer basket had a private label product. So I was like, wow, that's an opportunity. And that's what led me to right off the bat, right after college, come back to Brazil and start a company, because the idea was to build a fully online retailer, a fully online supermarket that would be structured in such a way that it would only focus on delivery and would make a speedier delivery process, also would learn the consumer behaviors and would therefore offer them private label solutions and private label products based on what they were already consuming. So that was the whole point and the whole idea. And it all came from the fact that I had a summer project that made me sell 2 tons of potatoes to a B2B player. And then after that, I started a company here in Brazil in 2019. And then during COVID, in 2020, we sold it off to Priti, which is a Latin American unicorn. They do all kinds of deliveries. So they're a marketplace for the delivery of restaurants, shopping center products, retail products, etc. And then we came in with the quick delivery service, the quick delivery vertical, usually like, again, delivering in under 10 minutes products, more than 2,000 SKUs, actually more than 2,000 products across 7 different cities in Brazil. So I led that vertical, grew that vertical more than, I guess, 500x. And then I left that project in order to lead LTK's expansion in Latin America, actually. So LTK, if you don't know, it's a marketplace, or it's an app, actually, in which creators are allowed and can expose whatever they're wearing and then gain commissions based on the purchases that their consumers and their followers make on their recommendations. So to me, it was, first of all, it was an amazing opportunity to really understand more about the creator market and the creator commerce, because obviously that was booming 3-4 years ago, and it is still booming and it's still like forecast to grow a lot. But also for me, it was a breath of fresh air to understand that there could be businesses in which every single part and every single stakeholder in the equation actually gets something out of it. So the creator obviously gets a commission based on the fact that a consumer buys whatever she's recommending, but she only gets a commission if it's a good recommendation, right? And if the consumer does not return the item. So to me, it was a breath of fresh air to understand that the consumer is winning that equation, the creator is winning in that equation as well, and obviously the retailer is winning because they're making sales. So I love the business model, and I, again, helped expand the business in Latin America. And most recently just left because I'm thinking of starting something else, and the entrepreneurial mindset is still there. And I think I'm young enough to try again.
I think that's a great example of where guidance was definitely lacking, and being given a project with no context, I think is something we're all very familiar with, and, figuring out how to make lemonade out of lemons or whatever
exactly
you want to use.
Yeah, no, you have to look at that as opportunity. My motto is, luck is when opportunity meets someone prepared. And I think every step of the way, I try to be as prepared as possible to face any opportunity and any challenge, or I guess to face a challenge as an opportunity every time a challenge came my way.
Absolutely. And actually, that great question to direct it to Priti now. From your transition from non-ad tech into ad tech, what's something kind of in that early career that you were missing out on, or kind of that guidance need?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience. I had 10 years of experience before coming into ad tech, and I was in fairly senior level roles. So coming in, I think what was missing was this lack of understanding or knowledge that you don't need to know everything in order for your skills to be transferable and for you to be successful. So I was trained to think, my generation, that sometimes you need to take a couple steps back in order to go 5 steps forward. And so I kind of came into a junior level role learning the operations. And it was super helpful, but it was a culture shock. Like, I came from corporate structure. You had trainings and lots of formalities. The way you dressed, the way you talked, everything was so different. And I didn't really know how to fit in. And I over indexed on fitting in and being like cool, or, maybe that's not cool, but like accepted, and not really like focusing on leaning into my strengths. Even if I didn't know ad tech entirely, I knew that I would be able to learn quickly. And instead, I just sat back and I was a little quiet and I tried to fit the mold. It's kind of funny too. Like, at PwC, I was wearing dresses and heels and dressing very formally. And when I joined ad tech at Pomatic, my now husband, then boyfriend, I was like, dude, everybody at the office is like super casual. Like, they wear flip flops to the office. And so he's like, yeah, like, you can't wear these heels and dresses. Like, we need to go shopping. And we went to Anthro and we bought like flannel shirts, which I've retired since because that wasn't my vibe. But I remember my friends being like, dude, we've never seen you in like flannel shirts. Like, what's happening here? And I'm like, I have to fit in. Like, this is what people wear. Like, this is what startup culture is like. And it was navigating that and putting too much emphasis on fitting in. And, I also had a younger manager, and that was also new. I worked for very senior level, partner level, C-level people at these, multi-billion dollar companies. And so now I'm transitioning into a startup culture where this is a manager that's new to management and is 10 years younger than me. And I want to empower her. And I also want to fall in line and not be a threat, but I also want to be able to succeed in my individual role. And so I didn't really have like an outlet to know, okay, how do I navigate these, cultural differences, but then also advocate for myself and grow in an environment that is completely different. And the other thing I'll mention too, which is kind of funny, like, I can laugh about it now, but like, some examples, like in corporate, you take these quizzes at the beginning of the year, HR quizzes, right? Of things that you can talk about and that you don't talk about. And then you have to take a test in order to make sure that you're compliant, right? Startup, that doesn't exist. So like, you're taught, don't talk about age, don't talk about politics, don't talk about, religion and stuff. And like, my first couple months, like, that was like topic points, right? I joined when the election was happening between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And so the floor was like talking about politics and like their opinions on it. And that was really different for me. My first day, people were like asking about my age, and they were like, it was an open conversation on the floor of like, what's your age? We've been guessing because we checked your LinkedIn and we saw what year you graduated from college. So we think that this is your age. And I was like, oh my God. And then I uncovered that I was like the older person on the floor. And so it was such a shock, and trying to adjust to that. Like, if I would say to anyone, it's like, you don't have to adjust, just be you and know what your strengths are. And that was what was early, like, missing, is like being confident in my own shoes and not having to fit in.
Yeah, and I think that's confidence that comes with experience. And it's definitely a note that we all, I think, agree with by the nodding heads, that we all wish we had it maybe a bit earlier than we did. Maybe some of us more than others, myself included. But I think those are all very interesting points to consider. And then, of course, I think, Shari, you also had not a traditional introduction into the ad tech space.
Yes, definitely not ad tech, definitely not business as in any possible way. I came from the sciences. So I went to school for medical microbiology. I did field work. When I mean field work, we're talking Amazons of Ecuador. So imagine me going out there and during the time of malaria and doing field work, understanding what is the ecosystem, but also trying to find this poison arrow frog, which is crazy, and bring in clip a toe of the poison arrow frog, which is not going to hurt him in any possible way, get vials and bring him back to the States. So that was my field work for 2 months. Crazy. But when I graduated, I realized that there was no real work for field work here in New York. And I had to pivot. I was able to pivot from the marketing perspective and found a very junior role, but I was just starting to understand what is business. I never really had a business class because in sciences you're stuck with the chemistry, the physics, the biologies, and that's what I did, the anatomies. And I learned the business, and I went back from MBA while I was working, and I started my career in at WPP Media. Back then it was YNR, and it was just figuring out what it was. And I was working with somebody that's still in the business. He's actually CEO of one of our biggest agency partners that we have, but he was my boss. And we were just talking, and I learned from him. And I also had other women that were in the research role, and I did not even know research existed at that time. So I started to learn the business. I went to school. I was like, okay, I guess this is it. I have to pivot. There's no real roles out there for me. But I found the intersection between the sciences and all the powerful data and how to analyze data to bring it from the research perspective. So now I analyze a lot of data. I find the storytelling behind it, but also making sure that the data is solid. And of course, bringing in the science and the math background that I have, everything being statistical significance, because we know that's how our market operates. But it was a big pivot. And when I always agency life, so again, pretty just like you, very formal, because I was very senior. I led teams even of 50 people and above, and reported directly into chief research officers, data scientist officers, even to the CFO. And it is a different culture. And when I came to AdTech in 2019, same thing. I was like, well, I don't wear sneakers, never have. I wear 5-inch heels, a jacket, a blazer, and dressy pants. I was like, what's happening here? People are wearing jeans. I was like, not trying to fit in, but figuring out how I was going to work and navigate, because I'm still client facing. So people in the agency life expect that level of experience and the dress up code. It was different, but it was exciting because you were able to pivot a lot faster. You were able to innovate a lot faster. You don't have to wait months before a project comes into friction because it happens on the fly with ad tech. And it's so much fun. So, but yeah, I use my strengths when it came down to the narratives and the data and the science, and especially from the farmer's perspective. I love my farmer clients. Every time a farmer client comes in, I'm the one that jumps up and down because this is so exciting. I get to do research on patients and HCPs and comorbidities and all these other great, amazing stuff. So, but it is a learning experience. You have to learn how to pivot, even when it comes from an educational perspective, but even at our roles now, there are a lot of different stakeholders, there are a lot of different ideas. Strategies are changing very, very fast, and our world moves faster than before. So we have to learn how to pivot and find those opportunities where we fit in. But also, if you don't fit in, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's what I am today.
Yeah. I mean, those are all fantastic points. And I think from the data perspective, this is probably from a cheesy movie, but math is a universal language. Like the data is the data. And then it's on a lot of us to tell the right story with that data and have the knowledge to do so. So I think it's powerful, and it shows how quickly of all of us have been able to adapt no matter what happens. I would love to move into the next topic. And Ki, I need to hear from you, girl. It's been a little bit. But yeah, I think you're a great person, though, to start the next section with, which is what you learned later than you wish you had, especially from someone like you who's been at one company for the majority of their career. I'm sure there was lots of moments where you wish you had done something different or learned something too late, and whatever you're comfortable sharing, of course.
Oh, absolutely. I think there are plenty of moments. And I would say the thing that kind of jumps out to me, and especially since you talked about confidence, I think too, it kind of connects to that. I felt like I had confidence in my ability. I had confidence in what I was doing. Like I felt as though when I came into ad tech, I loved it. I loved the data. I loved playing in the data. I knew it like the back of my hand. And, I just felt as though I know what's going on right now in this industry and what's going on with our tech and with our campaigns. I had a really good sense of that. And I thought as long as I always like knew that, and as long as I kept confidence in my abilities and I kept working hard, that's all I needed in my career. Right? Folks are going to recognize that. They're going to value that. That was all that I needed to do. And it really worked for me for a long time because I had managers who did recognize that. I had managers who gave me platforms for visibility. Like those things were all working in my favor and I was just moving along. But then once any of those things start to drop off, right? It's up to you to then start making those spaces for yourself, creating those opportunities for yourself. And I mean, it took me a very long time to do that. I mean, I think about this too, because I was in a room and I knew the problem that we were working on. I also knew the pitfalls, right, of the solution that was being proposed. And I was trying to speak up, but I kept getting talked over. And my manager, a white male, was great and said, "Hey, we need to make sure the women in this room are being heard and we're creating space for that." It was so powerful for me in two ways. One, I hadn't even realized how complacent I'd been with that environment. Like, I didn't even realize just how used to it I had been. And then two, I started thinking, what if he wasn't here?
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's a scary thing to try to create space for yourself. It can be scary at times to be like, okay, how do I talk about myself? And I think I was taught, like, if you're talking about yourself, are you being like too conceited? Are you being egotistical? And it's like, no, like I should be able to speak up for myself. I should be able to tout about, or scream from the rooftops about the things I know well and feel confident and be able to kind of, take up space in those rooms. And I think it helps the company. Like if I had not spoken up, we could have gone down a path that would have hurt us. So it's kind of one of those things where I learned that a lot later and it took a long time to build that skill. I had to build it slowly for myself. I think I went even at one point once my manager had left, I went like 5 years, no promotion. And I knew and I was still working hard, right? And it was just kind of like I hadn't created that platform for myself. I didn't create that visibility for myself. And I was letting my career happen to me. I wasn't driving it. I wasn't shaping it myself. And so I just kind of wish that I had learned that a little earlier. But it's an important lesson. I think sometimes it takes time to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of us learn too late that loyalty is the most expensive thing that can happen to you. I think everyone knows like moving companies is a definite easy way to level up in compensation, title, etc. But there is a cost there too. You don't leave people that you love working for and with that advocate for you, and that's an unmeasurable benefit to what you make from a company. Yeah. And I think we even spoke about this, and I think Mariam, we spoke about it in our prep call too, but Ki, we were talking about kind of mentorship versus sponsorship and kind of the differences there. And I think Mariam, you also had some good examples on that topic.
Right. I guess for me, I realized the power of mentorship and the power of having a sponsor very, I guess, early on, but simply due to the fact that I lacked emotional maturity. And I'll be very honest with you. When we sold the company and I joined like this bigger corporation, it was still a startup, obviously. So the environment was much different from like the corporate world, but still like I was at that point, I think like 22, and I was leading the fastest growing vertical of the company. And I had the support of the founders, which was amazing. So they would always support me. They would always like mention me and mention the vertical and larger calls, etc., which was great. However, I lacked the emotional maturity to talk to my peers the right way, to be honest, and to really make friends with them and really like not step on their shoes and on their toes, to be honest. So for a while, I was literally like stepping on everyone's toes and doing like whatever I wanted to do because I felt like, like I felt like God. I was like, okay, this is like growing very fast. I am the fastest growing vertical in this company. Like they should love me, etc. And I realized that that was not the right way to act or to be within the company in order to really be able to even grow the business further, right? Because I needed the support of my peers. And so, had I not gotten sponsors and mentors outside of my work environment, but still within the startup ecosystem, that allowed me and showed me the way to like really understand the rules of the game and understand the fact that I wasn't going to be able to build anything solely by myself and by sheer will, that I would have to like compromise and really learn from my peers and become friends with my peers was essential. And again, because I lacked the emotional maturity, I needed that type of sponsorship and mentorship, to be honest, in order to be able to develop those skill sets early on. Otherwise, it would have taken me much longer. And then I guess I also like to differentiate sponsorship and then mentorship, because I feel like there are lots of people that are going to mentor you and kind of like guide you through situations. And I definitely have lots of mentors. But out of those mentors, there are only a few that are going to actually like, sponsor you. And by sponsor, I mean like really talk about you in rooms you're not in and really defend you and really like kind of like, like make sure that you're being heard, your name is being mentioned, and also that people are giving you the benefit of the doubt, let's say. So if I didn't have those kinds of people around me that trusted in me and really like allowed me to shine, I don't think I would have been as successful leading that vertical in Rappi as I did and as I was.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a really good call out, especially like Key, your note of like you were in the room when it happened, but what happens in the rooms that we're not in? We all wish we could clone ourselves, I'm sure, to get through all the 87 tabs I have open every day, but we can't. So we have to foster a lot of these relationships with people on different teams. And that's something I also try to work on with my own team, telling them I'm not expecting you to raise your hand for 80 more projects and go so far above your remit and what you're supposed to do. But it is really important to be visible within the company outside of our team, especially I'm sure we've all been part of like calibration exercises with HR. And it's really helpful when someone besides you at the table is advocating for someone on your team because they know how important they are and they've done the work to do so. And I think, Shari, that ties in well to kind of wrap up this topic point on what you learned a little later than you wish you had. You had, I think, in our prep call mentioned about the importance of speaking up.
Yes, just like KiYonna, I think I was brought up in a different era where women were expected to stay silent, be respectful, wait your turn. That is a flip on its head. It doesn't work that way. We are here for a reason, right? We're invited to that room for a reason. We have the expertise behind it. So I've learned and I remind myself constantly that you have to speak up, that you have a voice and we need to utilize it. And not just yourself, you have to empower your team and you have to empower other women. Because even now at Seedtag, we have so many smart women in the space. And naturally, this one person that I truly love working with, she always comes to me and asks for advice. And I tell her, you need to own the room. You are a leader. You have to remember that. Just because somebody says something and most likely is male driven, it doesn't mean you can't bring your opinion to the table because your opinion does matter. I know that comes with experience and expertise because I have been part of boardrooms where I'm always the only woman, especially Hispanic woman in that room. And it's a little intimidating, but you have to go in there and say, well, I deserve to be here. I have proven myself to be here and I know what I'm doing. I have a strong POV and I'm going to go with it. And it could be risky sometimes, but you also have to read the room. But it's important to remember that you were invited, people want to work with you, and you need to say the opinion, whether it can be taken or not, but at least you were able to voice it because your voice is very valuable and important.
For sure. And something I like to say too is I'd rather give out a speeding ticket than a parking ticket. So you're here for a reason. Be confident, own it. If something gets messed up, we'll figure it out. I'd rather you take the chance than be paralyzed by indecision on most things.
Absolutely. The last thing you want to do is stay quiet and say, miss my shot, miss my opportunity.
It will still happen, but we can, I think I personally try to be better about that reminder to myself and my day to day.
The CEO of Pomatic said this to me when I first joined. He was like, if you're in that meeting and you're holding back, you're actually holding the team back. So you're in that room for a reason. Speak up if you have an idea. And I thought that was incredibly empowering. So instead of making it about myself, I was thinking about, okay, I'm adding value. So if I'm in this room, I should say something if I can add value to the conversation and bring something new.
Absolutely, especially if it's a meeting where you're like, this could have been an email. Hopefully it's not, and then you're there for a reason and can actually drive the conversation forward. It's a great reminder. Priti, I'd love to continue with you for our next section on kind of what we're doing differently now. Obviously, a lot of the people here are leadership and have been leadership, and a lot of your behaviors are shaped by those experiences. But how are we actually now making sure that's done in practice, and we're fostering that for our teams and people and our peer set or our own board of directors, as we've all talked about, I think, too, separately. What is something that you can think of that you make sure to do now with your team or whoever else you're managing?
Yeah, it's I make sure to practice managing up just as much as I practice the ability to manage my team and manage across. Early in my career, I struggled with that. And, it's knowing what to say, when to say it, how to advocate for myself. And I thought, similar to you, Ki, like letting my work speak for itself. So I do a better job of tracking, okay, how am I pacing against my roles, responsibilities, and goals? I say this to anybody that I mentor or work with is like, you should be keeping a monthly tracker. Like, it doesn't need to be an Excel file, but just jot down, like, what are things that you accomplished that added value? And then, when you focus on that, you're able to just like talk about it. It doesn't need to be so rehearsed in a one-on-one or waiting for a, quarterly check-in or an annual review. You're thinking about, how am I adding value? And then you just are natural at how you present it. I also think like learning the art of knowing how to do it. So if you can find a coach, and I think that there's a difference between a coach and a mentor. A coach is going to help you. I learned this from an executive coach. Like this is somebody that's going to ask you questions and help you suss out the answers, right? And then there's a mentor that's been on this path that you're on and has experience and is going to give you guidance on how to navigate that because they've had to navigate it. And so finding two people like that to help you know how to manage up is a very like delicate balance, and it is a lot of skill. But if you learn that early on in your career, you set yourself up for success. And I think like that's a big thing that I also try to teach my team members. A lot of young people, they come in and they did exactly what I did. They come in and they know what their roles and responsibilities are, what their goals are, and they're checking the box. And they're talking about what they bring to the table. So 2 things that I focus on. What are your strengths? And how are your strengths showing up in day-to-day work? And how else should you be flexing those strengths in other ways, whether it's in your day-to-day work, in interpersonal relationships, in other projects that you could be doing? You don't need to say yes to everything, but say yes to the projects that are going to help you flex those strengths. And then the second thing that I always encourage my team to learn, sometimes the younger employees don't pick up on it, but I hope that like it sits with them so later they pick up on it, which is make sure you prep. Like when you're in a meeting with an executive, internally or externally, know what your points are that you want to make, right? You can't just ramble. You have to get to the point and you have to know how to manage up. And it's not just about highlighting the value, but also helping to solve problems. That's how you add value in a company. And so like a lot of young people don't, that's not something you learn in school. It's not a book that you read on how to manage up. You need somebody that's going to help you with that, right? So like I try to do that in a management perspective while also trying to apply it in my own individual role.
Absolutely. And then I think that also brings me to KiYonna you mentioned before with being feeling like you didn't realize you were complacent. But it also it could be more of like a female attribute. And we were talking on our prep call a little bit about kind of the different auras or vibes that we have between men and women. And I'd love for you to elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I mean, as part of that, I think like as women in a lot of ways we have, and especially women of color, I see also a lot of us are as well. Like, I think we have this attribute of being one, feeling like we should be quiet, be quiet or spoke when spoken to, don't speak up too much, that's too aggressive, right? And then I felt as though I was starting to find my voice, and that was great. And I was finding it and I was wanting to use it all the time. And I think that there is a balance, though, kind of talking about Priti saying it, there's always a balance you're trying to find. And I was finding that now I'm starting to like talk over other people in meetings so that I can make sure I'm taking space in this room. So now I'm becoming that exact thing that was shutting me down. So I think where I've been more intentional has been kind of staying in my, what I like to can think of still my feminine power. Like these were more masculine attributes. Sometimes they're described as masculine attributes that I felt were being rewarded, but I wanted to lead differently. I didn't want to be that. I want to change that room. I want to make it more welcome and opening for everyone, and not just keep, creating the behaviors that I didn't respond well to. So I think that has been a really big part of what I'm trying to do as a leader too, is like, how do I lead with the empathy, the compassion? I smile a lot, keep my smile on my face, but still hold firm, still make sure that, I am taking up space. So just trying to find that balance, I think, has been something I'm always struggling with still, but I think that still is very important for us.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's figured out the perfect balance, but I can DM my number if you have and let me know what it is. But then I think for Mariam, you all do a lot of mentorship on the side as well. And I think for you, you have a certain way of approaching it, touching on the sponsorship or mentorship topic we were talking about before, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you approach mentorship.
Right. I think for me, it's just the fact that I was very lucky because I got to a leadership role very young. And nowadays, when I see young people in leadership roles and when I see them making the same mistakes that I did, especially again with regards to emotional maturity and dealing with other stakeholders in a company, I always try to really be a mentor for those women. Again, as Priti said, because I've been there and I've made a lot of mistakes, I don't want them to make as many mistakes. At the same time, however, I do see exactly what you guys were saying. So there are the types of people and the types of women very similar to me that we're like very aggressive and we come in very strong and we really try to outdo everyone else and like we speak our minds and etc. And you have to like tone it down a bit and really understand again the scenarios and the rooms you're in. But at the same time, on the other hand, there are some women that end up in leadership positions very early on, but they're the opposite, right? Like they're very soft, very calm, they don't speak their minds, etc. So it's reconciling those two types of profiles. So I love to like get them in the same room usually whenever I'm mentoring, because I love them to get to know one another and to learn from one another. So I do a lot of those actually, exercises with like both profiles in the same room. And it's usually very fun because at the beginning, they're judging one another. Unfortunately, as we know, like we grew up in a society where, again, at least like in my case, like I would always judge other women. So if someone else was like more aggressive or etc., I'd be like, I would feel a bit uneasy about that. And I realized again later on that people would probably felt very uneasy with me as well. But it's very fun because when I put them in the same room, like they very much judge one another in the first few minutes. And they're like, oh, like she's so aggressive and like, oh, she doesn't speak her mind. And then as they get to know one another, they realize that like underneath the surface, they have the same problems. And they both like suffer from imposter syndrome. They both suffer from what I call like the duck syndrome of like showing that everything's perfect, but underneath they're like really like swimming for their lives and etc. And so that's a good way to like break apart preconceived notions of how a woman should behave in a leadership position, and also creating sorority, I guess, and creating an environment where they can empathize and really grow together. So yeah, that's my approach.
Yeah. What was the other syndrome? You said imposter syndrome?
The duck syndrome. So the duck usually like underneath the water, they're like really like swimming with their legs and like really like, aggressive with their legs. But on the surface, on top of the water, they're just like sliding and gliding. And so it's the duck syndrome.
I love that. That's so true. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it was like true, to be honest, like in college as well. So like just making a very small comment. I remember the first time that I went to Harvard. Again, I came from a public school in Brazil, like with a full ride scholarship. And I get there and everyone is like the best in what they do and the best in their schools and the best in their countries. So you're pretending everything is fine, but underneath it all, you're just like really scared that you're not gonna like be the best anymore, that you're not gonna be able to like get the grades that you got in the previous years or like in high school and etc. So it really takes time to get over the duck syndrome and really like open up and talk to people about your vulnerabilities. And I guess like creating that environment for women in leadership early on is a great way of making them realize that they're not.
Yeah, I love that. And it's such a good reminder. I think for a lot of us who started in male dominated industries specifically, you were usually the only woman in the room at the table, if there was even, and there usually wasn't even a woman in leadership to look up to for direction. So it's very easy to have that like against mentality, and like if another woman's being interviewed, that can't happen. I'm the woman here, and I very much enjoyed seeing that perspective change over the past decade or so. It's a lot more community driven, as it should be. It's a lot more matriarchal, or however you want to say it, a matriarchy. Would love to actually have one in real life, but we'll get there. And I think that we can all be reminded of where we came from, but still be better going forward. And this has been a lovely conversation. To kind of wrap things up, I would love for everyone to share a lesson that has moved them forward, whether that's advice you would leave for someone starting in our industry of ad tech today, a belief that you hope the next generation won't have to be combative with. But yeah, Shari, I'd love to start with you.
Well, my emphasis is always about inclusivity. It's hard for us women, and it's lonely at the top. When I was the agency life, like I said before, I'm always the only woman in leadership, only women leading things, leading presentations, and maybe it's because leading pitches. It's hard, so it's lonely at the top. But find those circles, and if those circles don't exist, build them. Chief is a great place to be. I've been in that what's it called, membership for a while now. It's all women leaders. There's a lot of places out there, and like I said, if you can't find your spot, build it. There's no better place than to build what actually works with you, right? And bring your own ideas, but also surround yourself with the people that are going to lift you up and hold your hand sometimes, because I do believe we need that. Priti said also, manage up. You have to manage up. Even when you first start your career, it's not about showing what you have done, what you have, keep track, keeping tabs. It's really about showing up at the very end. When you're in that meeting and you're having your reviews, you can show exactly what you did, and you're confident enough because you're the one that built it. You're the one that delivered. You're the one that had a success. And again, be your own cheerleader. You have to advocate for yourself. I've learned that just maybe almost in the past 10 years, be your own cheerleader, because it's not in our way to being. It's always, well, we'll do our job and somebody's going to find and somebody's going to say, yeah, she was amazing, let's give her a promotion. You have to be your own cheerleader. You have to toot your own horn and find the circles. If not, build them.
Love that. And Priti, we actually do have a co-founder of a wonderful women's group, Advanced Women, on. So I think you can double tap the communities that we can find. Yeah, Priti, I'd love to hear kind of your closing lesson that moves us forward.
It's kind of threefolds, and I'll kind of go off of you, Shari. I love what you said. I think like when I loved, someone had shared this with me younger in my life. Actually, my mom did, is like, you're the only woman, that's okay. See that as an opportunity for you to like do something new and lift other women up, right? So like, don't feel uncomfortable in that moment, own it, and see how you can like now bring others into the fold. So I love what you said, Shari. I totally agree with that. And what I'd add to that is be curious and build your network internally and externally. So what I mean curious is ask every question, and don't frame it with, sorry, this is a dumb question. If somebody's making you feel like it's a dumb question, they're probably not the person to go to ask a question, right? So that's how you weed out the people that you don't need to go to, but be very curious. And what I'd ask the younger generation is intentional. So when you're being curious, it's not just, so go to every department, learn about the people in those different departments, learn what their jobs are, what they're expected to do, and how they contribute to the bigger picture, and how your role is working with those individual roles to contribute to the bigger picture. When you're being curious there, also get to know those people. Like, it doesn't need to be transactional, like what is it that you do and what are your goals and how do you do your day to day, but like get to know that person. You never know how like those soft skills and those soft like connections might actually like play up in the work environment for both of you. And then the second thing is make sure, and this is kind of what the curious part is, make sure you're building that network internally as much as you are externally. So one thing I've been practicing for the last several years is I pick 2 people every month that I don't know at all, and I tap into them through LinkedIn, and I just ask them if they're open to a networking call. So I'm building that external network beyond just like, events that I get to go to, while also having those champions internally. Here's why. A lot of us oftentimes think that our direct line manager is going to be the person that's going to help us succeed and grow. But that's not how it works. That manager is not incentivized to think about, how am I going to promote Priti, right? They're thinking about, we have goals in place. I hired Priti, and we're now going to be able to achieve those goals because she's in this role. So it's important for you to have those champions and be curious externally, because that person might end up being the next department that you get pulled into to work in. That's exactly what happened for me. I went from customer success to sales to being a GM to new company. That person might end up being a reference for you. That person might be a champion or a sponsor, like Mariam said. So as curious, intentional, and network internally and externally. It's so important. You'll see the promotions happening just naturally, and you don't need to then rely on that direct line of manager.
Yeah. And I really like the generational specific comment. KiYonna, I think your closing advice is related to that as well.
Well, I think for me, part of this is I was thinking as I was listening to everyone is really about also taking more risks, actually. This is something maybe myself and partly maybe generational too, of like, I didn't take as many risks because I was like, am I qualified to take this risk even? And I should probably even reshape it as not even taking a risk, but seizing opportunities, because there were possibly times where it was an opportunity and I was too afraid and too uncomfortable. And I wish that I had been embracing how uncomfortable I was and done it anyway. And I wish that also I had reframed it as just something scary and risky as an opportunity to grow, because I felt as though I could have probably gone and been a director or a VP at another company, right? But I was like, oh, can I manage a team that big? Can I drive a strategy that large? Like, I haven't done exactly that. So am I even qualified to do it? Where I did. I had all the skills necessary. And so I think it's one of those things of really not feeling as though don't underestimate my own self, my own values, and see these as opportunities, and don't be afraid to seize them. I think something that kind of goes along with that too, which is another part, is people used to always say to me, don't let perfect get in the way of good. I think it's even, don't let perfect get in the way of great. Don't let perfect get in the way of amazing. Don't let perfect get in the way of impressive. Like, it was so important for me to have everything right, be perfect in order to like deliver something, in order to apply for something where I could have been fantastic. Right. So I didn't need perfection. So I would say those would be some big lessons I would love for folks to take.
And there's actually a study on that. I think it was Frontiers in Psychology, where they actually studied that when it comes to getting promoted, men basically just have to show potential and women have to prove performance. And I think Sheryl Sandberg also, I might be misquoting her, but she called out, I think in her Lean In book a long time ago, that women won't apply for something unless they have 8 out of 10 requirements. Men will do it with 2 or 3. And it's just the inherent confidence that's there. But it also is clearly repetitive across companies that women are not promoted based on potential. And we have to feel that perfection need, and we have to always strive for it. So it's a good reminder that we're not crazy. It's happening across not only our industry, but most industries. And it's something that we can hopefully change together. And then Mariam, last but not least, I'd love to hear your closing lesson.
Okay, so for me, one of the things that I definitely think women should focus nowadays, especially, is really developing critical thinking skills, and really, like, I guess, not just developing, but really like focusing on the fact that education is very much key. And the reason I say that is because we see a lot of people, especially the younger generations, using a lot of AI and a lot of different tools and a lot of different solutions and softwares and etc. And one of the things that I think will define how well you use it and how well you advance in your career by using AI is not necessarily how you use it, but the critical thinking you associate with using it. And by that, what I mean is like really being able to filter exactly what you're using it for, and literally be able to like judge whatever the AI is filling out for you and how useful that is and how you edit it and etc. So I see a lot of, again, the younger folks, even like younger than me, honestly. I'm 29 at this point, so I feel like I'm older than the younger generation that's using AI like on a daily basis for their tasks and etc., the analysts, etc. But I feel like sometimes they use it in such a way that they just don't filter whatever is being spilled out, right? And they just kind of like use those materials and use those the information that the tools are providing. And I think what's going to differentiate the great from like the great analysts and really like make them grow in their career versus the good is exactly being able to like filter through the knowledge that you're being given by these tools and applying it the correct way instead of just like literally like copy pasting it. And I feel like it's a very big slippery slope, and it's a very like easy way to just kind of like, you know, get lost in your career, or like even like, again, like lose your job at some point to AI if you do not know exactly how to filter, and if you are not constantly developing those rational thinking skills and educating yourself and evolving yourself, not only in the use of AI, but in any other, you know, topics related to your work that will help you in filtering how you use the output that the AI is giving.
Yeah. That's something I feel like I'm talking about all the time. Like AI isn't coming for your job, but people who know and understand AI are. I think we've all drastically overestimated what AI can actually do for us. Sure. And especially all our agents just tell us we're right, no matter what. And if you're just taking it at surface and you're not actually looking at how the data is being told, looking at the analysis the LLM did to come to their conclusion, you're going to miss some things that are pretty important. And I've seen examples of companies like creating targets and bonuses and financial plans based off AI that was wrong because it just wanted you to be happy with their answer.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. The shortcut is not worth it in the long term. It might help for email drafting, a few like workflow things, but you still need that inherent knowledge that comes with experience and working with people in real life, not just with an LLM. But amazing. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining today. I thought this was a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to share their stories and their lessons and some guidance to our listeners. And I really do think that these shared experiences can truly help move our industry forward. I do invite our listeners to continue the conversation on LinkedIn and the comments. Feel free to reach out to the wonderful women on this podcast. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. And I'd love to hear any key takeaways, and make sure you tag Seedtag in it. But thank you, ladies. It's been nice to see everybody.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you so much.
I've learned so much. Thank you, guys.